So we're going to go ahead and get started. Steve, I'll let you introduce our presenter.
All right, thank you, Rob. It's really my honor tonight to introduce Ron Peiffer to you. For the sake of full disclosure, Ron has been a photography colleague and friend of mine for now a little over 10 years. He's a Maryland-based photographer whose interest in photography began in the 1950s with his family's tattered box camera. Ron calls the Arundel Camera Club in Severna Park his photography home. The club has been around since the 1950s, close to 70 years. Wow. And Ron has been an active member in it since 2010. He's won many awards in recent years, including the Frederick R. Kelly Photographer of the Year Awards in 2017 and 2019. Along with myself, which is where I originally met him, Ron was one of the founding members and directors of the Baltimore HDR Club, which evolved into today's Creative Photography Society, where he remains on the board of directors. Ron also serves as member at large on the Executive Council of the Maryland Photography Alliance, or MPA as we know it, which, as you know, has membership of 20 community photography clubs statewide, including our Hartford club. And Ron received invitations to exhibit in prestigious MPA gallery shows in 2017 and 2019. Ron's a certified judge for MPA, and he judges at club photography competitions and also does critiques. He feels the MPA Judge Certification Training Program was an excellent way for him to better focus on his own work. Ron works in both color and monochrome photography, but leans toward black and white because he feels the medium can convey emotion with greater impact. And in recent years, he's added youth league sports photography to his list. That's largely a grandfather duty that has yielded many personal rewards for him and his family. Before retiring, Ron's career spanned 4 decades as a Maryland educator and state education administrator out of Annapolis, which has contributed to his approach on photography. He feels everyone always needs to get out of their comfort zone and stay in learning mode. And Ron believes everything you've experienced in your life molds what your mind sees through the viewfinder, regardless of your photography genre. Without further ado, I turn it over to Ron, who I'll personally thank for doing this for us tonight. Ron, take it over.
Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity to do this. I haven't had, particularly with the shutdown, haven't had a lot of opportunities to get out and critique and do any judging. And like anything else, you just need some muscle memory from repeating the task. So this is good practice for me, and so on. But as Steve kind of said, I really did do the judge training through MPA from a selfish standpoint, in the respect that I really wanted to understand better the mechanics of looking at a picture as a judge. And then that would help me think about how to better create images that might work with a judge. Interesting thing about all that is that what I learned from it, and what I kind of knew inherently in the first place, is when I was an educator, you know, I put a lot of time, and I did my doctoral work in assessment and accountability. So we had, you know, I'm used to taking assessments and tests, and you have right answers and you have wrong answers. But it was interesting how we got to judging, and right answers can be wrong answers, and wrong answers can be right answers, and it just depends on the fact that your context when you view it can skew your opinion a bit about a piece. So you really like something, you really don't like something else, and that underlies, you know, trying to make fairly valid evaluation of what are the attributes of the image and what can work and what not. I mean, you have your own things you're interested in, and I've got certain subjects I move toward, but you would think that there would be a real hard set of right and wrong about judging, and a good example of that was an image I had submitted as a print at the print competition, open print competition about 2 months ago in my club. It's of a dragonfly, and I must have about 50 dragonfly photos I've done over the years. And this was one I prided myself in feeling it was the best one technically and compositionally. And we had a judge who looked at it and said, it's really technically good, but there's too much dead space. So it didn't get honorable mention. It just got lost in works. I brought it back in which we're allowed to do, into the digital competition 2 weeks later, and it won first place in color. So it's one of these things that the second judge looking at it, we're looking for different attributes than the first one. Is the first one wrong and the second one right? I absolutely like to think so, since I won. But on the other hand, you do end up with some contradictions like this. So when we evaluate and give you some feedback on it, that's going to be from my point of view. But the kinds of things, and Steve asked me to talk a little bit about what to look for. First thing to look for is impact. So I've got to look at the picture, and it's got to be something that Fred Venicio's a friend, a photographer of mine, for a number of years. And Fred looks at a picture. He said, if it has impact, it kind of almost shakes him when he looks at it. He has a real emotional reaction to it. And that's, if it has super impact, that it's going to do that. You're going to look at it, and then you're going to start trying to process the image. And as a viewer, now as a judge, I want to see, does it have impact? Okay, if it really works for me, it's got good impact. Then the second thing is, I want to go through and answer the question, why? What really went together to make the picture work for me? Let me do what Chip Bolchin is our Arundel Camera Club president, and he's a trained photographer, and I'm not. I learned it through my own self-education over the last 50 years. And Chip says, first thing you do is, once you look at the impact, second thing you do is you look at you walk the four corners of the picture, and you look at how the person has used the real estate within the box, and to see how all of that fits together. Then you start working down to looking at, where does your eye go as it moves through the picture? Is it go in a coherent way, or as you, the photographer, are you able to make the image so that when I look at it, I almost don't have a choice. It just takes me right through to a certain point. But if there are certain distractions to it, and I think in the training that MPA judging does, you had an opportunity to look at and kind of put words to and names to some of the distractions that keep us from really understanding what we're looking at. So that's kind of the method you go at, and but just keeping in mind that if I give you feedback on something, and you love the picture and it's really working for you, then you're done. Basically you're the maker, and you have the opportunity to make a decision. Now, what I can do is give you one opinion or one view, and my opinion is supposed to be based on the training in terms of being able to have the things that enumerated that distract from the image or that contribute to the quality of it. So that's kind of what it is. And in the training, by the way, I went through a lot of it is in addition to kind of getting to understand the vocabulary and the application of it. You saw modeling, some modeling of that from the trainer. And then at the end of that portion of it, then you went to you went to practicing it yourself. And the most difficult part of this is I can look at a picture and think it all through in my head, but being able to articulate it in a way that you can go home and use that information later to either modify it or to modify your thinking about it or whatever, you know, that's a bonus. So that's sort of what it's about. It's been a really good training experience, I think, for me and Steve. What we have, we've had 3 classes go through. Is that correct?
Yes, we had 21 graduates, and we now have, out of those 21, we now have 11 certified judges, you being one of those.
Okay, great. So how would you like to proceed this evening then?
All right, I'm going to open the images. We'll let the photographer introduce the image, and then we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great.
Now, our first image this evening is from Keith Belsner. Keith, would you like to talk about the image a little bit? I think he's okay. So we'll just turn it over to you then, Ron.
Okay. Now, right now, all I see is a list of photos. I do not see the raw image yet.
That's what I see.
Hang on. Apparently, it only shares one window at a time.
Okay.
Bear with me here.
I see you.
I'm sorry. How about now?
It's thinking.
Oh,
There we go.
There we go. You're talking. And by the way, let me tell you one issue with this. Last time I did a online judging, I had PowerPoint versions of the images on my laptop to the left, and I looked at those while I looked at them on the screen. So there's somewhat degradation of the image on the screen. So I can give you a lot of feedback, but I can give you a lot of feedback, but up to the point of being able to understand where the sharpest part of the image is, or if indeed it is sharp enough, I can't tell you that. So only the maker will know that. Okay, and who did this image?
This is Keith Belsner.
Okay, Keith is not here.
He's logged in. He's muted, I believe.
Oh, muted. Okay. Okay. Well, one of the rules we often hear is that you've got to try to avoid symmetry in a lot of images because you have it off balance, and that'll make it more interesting to the viewer, and it'll force you as a viewer to kind of move through the image differently. This one is absolutely symmetric, and sometimes, and I think it looks like it's a square crop on it too. So it feels like it's the right crop, and it feels like being dead center symmetric is probably the right way to go. And I really like the colors ranging from these pinks and blues and purple up in the sky up to the blue as you move through the image. So that all works really well as a background. Now, this is a landscape format. Probably you'd want some interesting aspect of the compositionally. You want something to be able to be the primary subject of it. I'm looking at this, and holistically, when I look at it, it's very restful and peaceful, and that's the kind of impact you want to have from it. So that's really good. Things seem to be reasonably sharp from the foreground pilings, I guess, all the way out. So that looks to be pretty good. I can't know that for sure because of the resolution, but that seems to work fine. One could argue that you could crop the picture a little bit more up from the bottom and take off maybe an inch or so off of it and bring it up closer. But there's something soothing about a square crop, and it feels like it's probably the right formation. Now, I like usually to crop things fairly tight, and this seems to be on the sides and probably on the top about as tight as you'd want to go. So let's say that that's good. Now, I would probably, you've caught good action, wave action, and so on. It makes it really interesting. I would probably be even more enthusiastic about the picture if there was somehow a subject that was extremely interesting other than the pilings out at the end. So I think it's one of those that's it's a good, peaceful, really comfortable landscape or seascape, as it were. It probably would be stronger if we had some additional subject in there that would give you a point of focus for this. Now, I don't see technically any problems with any aspects of the image. Sometimes you get a little bit of little white lines, or like the pilings out at the end against the dark sky if it's been over manipulated. It does not appear to be over manipulated. So anyway, so that's kind of my offhand reactions. You all have any questions about that?
Yeah, I do. One of the rules I think is of composition, I think is kind of important, is balance. And I just want to throw this at you to get your impression, because as I look at this, it's a little bit off center, which would seem to destroy the balance. However, the wave is sort of a crescendo increasing to the right. And it just seems like that just equalizes out the balance in the image. You see that?
Yeah, that is a good point. I can see that it does. It is a little bit further out to the left, but you're right. Having that darker, that wave off to the right-hand side, maybe that distracted me, and that's a good thing from the rest of it. No, it's a good point.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments or critique they'd like to offer? Okay. So give me just 1 second. I had 2 more submissions come in. I want to put them in the folder real quick. All right. So image number 2, this is Keith's second image. Can everyone see it?
Not yet.
Yes.
Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Good.
Yes.
This is the same photographer.
Okay. Wow, you get a twofer here. You get Domino Sugar and you get Little Havana at the same time. What a lot of color from the fire plug up front all the way through the mural on the wall. It seems to me so let me think here a little bit. Okay. All right. I think that my immediate reaction, I really like the color in this. It's just brilliant. I've got a little concern about that, in that looking back at the Domino Sugar plant, you see some of the bricks are red, as I remember when I see it. And then some of them go a little bit purple toward the back there. And I would probably want to work toward having some more uniformity in the color there. You have to be careful when you saturate, use the saturation sliders in Lightroom and some other things. That sometimes it kind of makes you fall in love with the color, and it gets a little bit past where it ought to go. So I would probably dial that back a little bit. So now I'm trying to follow my eyes as I walk through this picture. So the first thing that captures my eye actually is the woman on the left. She's pointing to the right. So, and that's where my eye ends up going. I start with here, I go over past the Little Havana and up through the Domino Sugar. So in many ways, this actually ends up working to give you a good eye movement through the picture. I don't see any particular blown out areas that distract me in that process of that. Now, here's the question that comes up that you all may have some thoughts about. Luminar 4 and some other software, including Photoshop, gives you a chance to swap out the skies that don't work. This image looks quite nice, so you have a little dilemma. It's a little bit bland as skies go, and therefore it causes the light to be a little bit flat. And if we had at least a bit more direct sunlight here, there'd be some shadows and some other some detail kind of showing up in the image, both the foreground and the background. And by the way, I do like the fact that the foreground is absolutely in focus, and the domino is in focus as well. They probably had to either composite or use like a F22 or F32 or something to a setting to make that work. But with to the sky, Luminar 4 gives you the ability for right or wrong to swap out skies and put something in that works for you. So the dilemma is, if you did that, would you be able to improve the image by bringing something in that would be pleasant blue skies with a few clouds, or a busy stormy sky? I would argue that maybe looking at replacing the sky there might make that better. Now, that said, sometimes when the skies look like this, despite all the color in the foreground, it kind of works as a black and white. So that's a quick reaction to it. But my biggest concern right now would be just trying to make sure this purple area right in the very center of the picture would get addressed. I'd be interested if anybody else has any thoughts on this.
All right.
Hi, this is Keith.
Yes.
Hey, so thank you for all the input there. And you're right, I do see the purple in the center of the building there. And with the sky, that actually is from Luminar 4.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and that one actually worked the best. All the others I tried just didn't go with the picture I felt.
Okay. Well, I as Steve knows, I liberally paste in other skies, and I spent a lot of my time when I was out west in early March trying to get some good western skies for images, and I do use them. But you may want to try another one that's not real busy. But you know, the problem is your color palette here. You've got this unusual blue color in the front, nice red bricks in the back. If you end up with the skies are too azure, too blue, you're going to end up not working the color palette really well. So have you tried it as a black and white, Keith?
No, I have not. And the day I shot it, it was actually, a very flat, overcast day. So Yeah, there was very little sky to begin with, and like I say, I played with pretty much them all, and
Mhm.
this one worked the best. I felt.
Okay. I would say that the flat light sometimes, or for me, works better in black when I move over to black and white than it does in color because but it's interesting how the colors are so bright. So
Right.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's real helpful. I appreciate that background.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Right. Give me just. Alrighty. Bear with me 1 second. I'm having an issue with one of the images. There we go. All right. Can everybody see Howard's image, or is it just a black screen?
Black so far.
Black, green.
Black.
All right. Somebody had to send their images in DNG format. It's a tricky way. Bear with me. Howard, I'm going to apologize. I can't get your image to open. So we'll have to come back to that.
He socially distanced his photo without knowing.
Okay, so everyone should be seeing this next image shortly here.
Got it.
Got it.
Okay. This is from photographer Michael Eubanks. Mike, are you on?
I am on.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it was. I was out hiking at North Point Park, and I originally it was an overcast day. It was actually New Year's Day. I originally shot it in color. I had a 50mm lens on. I didn't particularly care for the photo, but I was trying to capture the reflections on what I call the flat swamp there. So I came home, converted it to a black and white, and I actually like it in black and white better than the color version. Of course, this time of year, there wasn't much color to work with in the first place. So I think it works better as a black and white. I have my critiques of the image, but I'm interested in what Howard has to say.
Well, I think going black and white with this is absolutely the right decision. I really like the smooth, clear water up front, and the reflections are really quite interesting. So it does make it work well. And I'm trying to
Sorry,
walk.
Ron, I called you Howard there.
Oh, that's okay. I try to think through this. I have a little difficulty with the picture, only in the respect that if there were some subject in there, such as blue heron, or I'm just making this up, an old boat in the back or something that would become the focus of the picture, it would really work well. And I have to tell you, I do a lot of pictures like this, and then I get someplace, and whenever I'm there, I just have it emotes some kind of a feeling or an emotion, and you just feel like you want to try to capture that. So, and I do that, and I bring it back, and I look at it, and I really like the picture, but I have a hard time trying to think of it as something I put on the wall or as a competition picture. So now I will say that you've done a really nice job with the processing on this. The blacks are nice and rich. The midtones are really good. And the image itself is pretty sharp. What do you remember what f-stop you used to be able to get this depth in it?
It was probably well, that's one of my critiques of the photo. I think it was a 4.8.
Okay. Well, that seemed to work well enough for.
Yeah, I caught everything in the foreground. The
Yeah.
background got a little fuzzy.
Well, I think that's okay in something like this. Yeah, so I think black and white was a good medium. I would only look for a single subject, and in some respects, I see these vertical lines with the trees. Oftentimes, I will crop a picture non-standard. In other words, a lot of competition photographers in the state of Maryland make their images 11:14 because they fit in the relatively inexpensive mats that you can buy at Michael's, the 16:20 mats on the outside. But I really like to let the picture itself tell me where to put the crops. So it's fairly dark on the left-hand side. I'm wondering if it might come up a little bit more if you took off perhaps from this first or second tree, go straight up and down, take that out of the picture, and maybe even think about a vertical crop in the front here, and take away the things on the right-hand side too. But that said, it still doesn't quite solve the one issue of having a particularly interesting subject out there to draw your attention. That said, sometimes a piece is just a mood piece, and you look at it, and it works the way it is. So that's sort of up to you in terms of what you want out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Alrighty. This is coming up here. Next image. Before we get to this image, Howard, if you want to try to send me JPEGs of your images, we'll get them in. This is Mike's second image. Mike?
Different height, different day, still winter, pretty overcast day. And again, I thought black and white worked. The old building was kind of a pale green, which would have been the only color in the whole image.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't look bad being the only color in the image, but I had to obviously clear some brush and some tree branches just to get this shot.
Mm-hmm. Now is this? I will say it's kind of appears a little bit blown out. The brush on the on the left-hand side, it's the whitish areas. That's not snow, that's just brush, right?
Right.
Okay. This would, if this were thrown off balance a little bit, thinking about the crop, let's see what happens. Think about coming in to just left of the no hunting sign. In other words, right now it's very symmetric, and so that creates a relatively balanced image. But it seems to me, if you got down a foot or so, whatever the measure would be from the hunting sign, and have the crop it up close from the bottom. See, all this foreground doesn't really do anything for your image. It's there, and it's a little bit blown out, a little bit out of focus. But if I crop in closer, and I get, I'm doing this with my hands right now across this, and I have an image where the no hunting sign is up closer to the left-hand corner of the picture, maybe cropped down a little bit from the top. Now all of a sudden I've got a line that leads you sort of from the left-hand corner of the picture down to the lower right-hand, and it throws you off balance a little bit. And no hunting sign, which is your key subject here, which really works, seems to me that works a bit better. Now the difficulty with the lighting there, I like the fact that the wood is, and I can't tell for sure if it's sharp and crisp, but I do like the fact a lot of texture is coming out in that. So that really is your most interesting. And I think that would really, if from my vantage point, that would really bring it up a few notches if you cropped it that way. How does that?
Yeah. So crop it from the left and crop the foreground out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give that a try and see what it looks like.
Yeah, I just if you look at it, you feel like you're out of balance a little bit. It should be working okay. No, it could be a cool picture. What is this, a hunting blind? I guess.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know what it was.
Blind. Okay.
I have a question. So what I'm about to suggest would not work because of the no hunting sign.
Okay.
But I'd like to get Ron's opinion on this, is that we tend to read images from left to right because of our culture of reading pages from left to right. And I've heard photographers say that's important. I've heard other photographers say, nah, that's overrated, whatever. But I have seen images that where you flip the image left to right, it has a different feel. And on this image, you have this large tree trunk. And if you had that coming in from the left side, it would kind of like be a leading line for the eye. And then offset the whole image a little bit to the right just a bit. What do you think?
So again, John, you're saying crop from the left?
No, what I'm saying is flip the image. So it will be, so the tree trunk, the big tree trunk that's leaning on the house, right?
Yep, I got
Instead
you.
of coming in from the right, would be coming in from the left. And that would create the leading line to the subject.
Yeah. I like that. I may try that too. Thanks.
That could work.
Well, it won't work because of the no hunting sign unless you're dyslexic like me, you know.
Oh no, you can. Well, in Photoshop world, you can remedy that pretty quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I just did one of it with a tree and an old ruin in Utah, black and white, and I did exactly what you said. The tree comes from the lower left-hand corner, and it goes right straight up toward the middle, and frames the ruin and the old Indian ruin in the background. And it's not a terrific picture, but it's pleasant to look at. It's smooth. You smoothly move from the left to the top. There are plenty of times when you can work from the right front on back. So I will do that every now and then. Most of these rules are made to be broken, I think. Anyway, good point. Good point about the left to right.
Okay, thanks.
Everyone see the image?
Yes.
This is from Jeff Hinty. I hope I said that right.
Correct.
Okay. Jeff, want to talk a bit about the image?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This was a very rainy, overcast day. We were at a different end of Paris than most people normally see. If you were to blow this up, it's like about 5 foot wide on my wall. The Arc de Triomphe is down the center. You can barely make out the other landscapes. It's just a different view of Paris than most people ever see. This is their financial business district. And it is a pano, I think at least 3 shots. And amazingly enough, I did it handheld. So I was kind of happy with that.
All right, I'm going to minimize the site. I was looking at you all on the right-hand side of my screen. I'm going to put that away so I can get the full impact of this thing. Yeah, this is pretty magnificent. One of the things that in the training that we use the term mature image. You ever heard that? Basically meaning that sometimes you look at a picture and when you're out traveling, you end up photographing the exact same image, every tourist going through and photographing the exact same image. And so you go to take it into a competition and you realize that 25 other people have the same picture. And it's very often, this is unusual, this angle from Paris, because this is nothing I've ever seen in any image. So it's definitely not a mature image in that respect. And I was in Chicago this summer. I got some really nice views from that. I know every picture I took was a picture that somebody else has taken, but this is really quite unique and I really like it. The problem with travel photography is the same problem everybody. When it's Thursday, you're in Paris, you've got to take the Paris pictures, regardless of what the weather is and the time of the day. So that works a little bit against you. You got the sky. You could play with that in one of the sky substitution applications and see if that perks it up a little bit. And by the way, sometimes people will take a sky that from one part of the country and pop it into another image, and it's not working because the skies there are never really quite like that. They're very different. And I saw that with some of the desert skies I looked at this past winter. I really like this. I like the fact that you've not punched the colors up beyond what they need to be. It's very centered from your location. This is one time that I'd be very comfortable with a centered image. Now, given the fact the horizon is in the very middle of the picture back here, it raises a question: is the picture, the sky is now half of your picture, with the exception of the buildings up front. So you might want to put a little bit of time in on looking about how that sky can really complement the rest of the image and make it work. You can't make it obviously a bright sunny day because you don't. It's a flat light. You do not have that kind of that kind of a day. But it may be that could be just brought up a notch or two from there. So I don't know if that's any use to you. And I really like the fact that every building here is absolutely perfectly straight up and down. Your horizon is straight all the way across. When I look at it, I look straight down the middle, and then I go over to the left and I'll look at this and go over to the right. Yeah, I think it works really nicely. I like the fact that you got some color brought in the right-hand corner from those cranes and the black and whites, or the red and white. I'm sorry. So Jeff, does that help any or?
Yep, it does. Thank you. My one thought was I was going to try to eliminate that antenna above the building on the left
Mhm.
and try to crop the sky down about halfway between the top of the antenna and where the current crop is.
Okay.
But I just hadn't done that yet. It was, this was actually a photo I took and had initially discarded. And then since we've been locked inside for so long, I took a relook at it and I go, oh, this is kind of cool. So that was fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I've been doing the same thing. I'm looking at some of my discards that actually, I'm a little smarter now than I was a year or two ago, and some of them actually can turn into decent pictures. That the antenna is, it depends on how authentic you want the picture to be. If you took it out and if you took it out, it probably would be a little bit less distracting. I've heard judges who would just obsess on something like that as being getting their eye, and that's all they can see when they look at the picture. I didn't have that problem with this at all. Though. That was just me.
Well, I mean, that was my one critique of the photo was whether or not that was a possible distraction as you look up in that right upper left-hand corner. So
Thanks for bringing it up. Now that's all I can see.
Rats.
No, I would crop it out and see what you feel about it. But yeah, it's really nice. Very different.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Our next image is from Judy Hoffmeister.
Okay, Judy, are you here this evening?
I am, yes.
Okay, would you want to tell us a little bit about that picture?
We were in Philly in October, and one of the places we were was for Oktoberfest, and they had a bunch of different merchants set up, and she just really caught my eye how she was looking at her booth and making sure everything was the way she wanted it for her customers, and just seemed very intriguing.
No, it's a nice nice side portrait. You got some expression on her face. Now I have to tell you, I don't do a lot of people photographs, so I really am not the best one to give you feedback on the lighting of the face and that kind of thing. It does look like it's fairly well lit here. Now, a question I have is, I can't tell how sharp it is from here. What's your recollection on this?
Quite honestly, I'm really not. I probably couldn't tell you a whole lot. I'm more just in the learning of how to use my camera manually. So, yeah, I wouldn't even be able to tell you what exposure or anything other than that either.
Okay, well, that's all right. I was just, when you have a chance, sit down and look at it and look at her eye and see if it is razor sharp. The focus. It looks to me to be a bit soft, but again, that could be it very well could be, and probably is my view of it here on my computer. But the other thought I had is, you see that white line coming out from her face to the right?
Yes.
And you see the little red that's behind her?
Yes.
Yeah, those two areas are distracting a little bit. So you really
Okay.
want me as a viewer to look at it and focus on her a good deal. Now, I ran into a picture. I took a series of pictures at an Indian powwow, actually up in Harford County from back in January, February. And I was trying to use a 200 millimeter lens to get portraits of some of the dancers, and they had some really elaborate costumes, and they had horrendous busy backgrounds. So the good news is you got the background is you got a lot of good bokeh here. It's good out of focus, so I can really focus on her. It may be that when you get comfortable, if you're not already with Photoshop, there might be some ways to substitute in a background in the back that would allow me to look just strictly at focusing on her. So the number one, I think compositionally, you've got a really good look at her. Her position in the image is really good. I love the hat. It gives her a lot of character. An earring is a good focus, and so on. So I think that it's got a really good start as an image. So the first question will be look and see if it's really sharp. And a lot of portrait photographers are going to really demand that you have the eye look really sharp, unless of course you're trying to evoke some motion here, which I don't think you are. But then the second thing would be to see if in the background you can, at the minimum, at least wipe out and blend in this white stripe and this red stripe, patch off to the right.
Okay.
And then on the left, I'm a little bit distracted by the dark spot over there, but not quite so much as the red. So that you could work a little bit of that. If you know, it's one of those things. If the image looks like it's really, really, really good to you, then it might be worth taking some time to try to do these little enhancements to try to get it to the next level.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. This is Judy's second image coming up.
Okay. Okay, this is, what have you, Judy, where is this?
This is from the 57th floor of a building in Philadelphia that we did a photo trip to.
Okay, is that, that's assuming sun up?
Sunset.
Sunset, okay. Yeah, as Steve knows, I don't make too many sunrises. I do make the sunsets though, so.
You're lucky to get up for lunch, Ron.
Well, if I push it. Okay, we have a pretty good focus on the objects up front. The problem we're going to run into at this time of the day is a bright sky and a dark foreground. So your dilemma is, how do I try to get both of them exposed well enough to really make my image work? So it would have been good to try to bring up the objects in the foreground a couple of notches so that you can see a bit more detail. It appears as if the objects up front are reasonably sharp and clear, and all the way out. And I love the reflection of the sunset in the river there. That really is quite cool. And then it fades off, and you see the as you're going to have in a lot of major cities, a lot of haze. It's at sunset or sunrise. It's going to be pretty evident. So the sky is very bright here, and but you don't want to lose that that color. There is a in Lightroom, there is a ND ND filter you can pull down from the top and darken the top a little bit so it's closer to the lightness, the illumination of the lower part of the image. Now, I did like the fact that you came down about a third of the way into the image and dropped the horizon there. You got that horizon absolutely perfectly straight. You've got every building here appears to be good and straight. So the composition in that regard is really very, very good. So brightening the foreground and darkening the sky might work. The way I do this sometimes is I will bracket a picture. I'll take overexpose it by a stop and 3/4, underexpose at a top, stop and 3/4, and expose it properly. And I usually use a spot metering off of the center of the picture. And that allows me to take the sky from the image that's less, with a lower exposure with a minus 1.7, and drop that sky in on top of what's here, and that works a little bit. And say with the foreground, it's just a bit darker than what I'd like. All that said, sometimes you can start fiddling around in Lightroom and be able to use the filters built into Lightroom and deal with the sky and deal with the foreground and get it close to where you want. So if you were able to get the light dealt with a little bit and just double check in the foreground that you have everything sharp enough there. It seems like it could be just a little bit crisper.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Alrighty. I don't believe our next photographer is here, but this is from Michael Holmes.
Okay. Well, now, to the best I can tell, I can see the eye of that eagle, and it looks absolutely razor sharp.
It's very sharp on the computer screen. Okay,
great. And I can see the light coming through those tail feathers there. That's absolutely gorgeous. And what I'm now catching is he's got a fish in his left talons there. So that's great. Nice, nice position. I love eagle pictures, and it's interesting how in all the competitions over all the years, I have very seldom seen eagle pictures win competitions. And I think that you are fairly close to Conowingo, which I assume that's where this was taken. Just a guess. It's just really nice and sharp. So now, the question I have is, you might want to anchor it onto something in the foreground that makes it interesting. I don't know that with the current crop that the tree to the left really contributes to the image. So I would have a tendency to want to crop it just to the left of the eagle and bring that down and make a nice image. Now, the other thing I'd wonder about is I look at the underside of the wings of this bird, and there's a lot of detail on the shadows there. And for this to be that sharp, and I'm guessing that if you're able to brush that a little bit with the brush in Lightroom, you might be able to bring out a little bit of detail without having to make that look muddy. It would be worth spending a little bit of time on that. But and the other question is, can you lighten up just the fish just a little bit so it's more evident to me that that's what's there? And some of these brushes are really quite accurate. You can really bring them up to the next level. I'm looking all the way around the bird's wings. I don't see any little white outlines and so on. It looks like a very clean, nice image. So yeah, this is kind of fun to look at.
All right. Hang on. This is Michael's second image.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you, this is, you kind of get a little dizzy kind of looking at the picture from these heights. This is really up there. Wow, beautiful. And I love the contrast and the colors between these buildings. It looks like New York City to me, my guess. They're all bunched in close together. So the question is, you've got a lot of lines here, and let's look at the vertical lines. On the right-hand side, you've got this green, the green building on the far right, and the right-hand edge of that building goes up and it leans out. Then on the right-hand side, it comes up and it leans out as well. And then what is perfectly done about this, and we've got a little discussion we could have about this. The centerpiece, the center line, the very middle of it, or just to the left of the middle, is this blue ground building in the foreground, and that line appears to be coming straight up perfectly so. So you've got a bit of distortion that you have to decide what you want to do. Now, sometimes looking down like this, you accept the distortion as being part of the view. If you start messing around with it in Lightroom, you end up getting a really unnatural look about it. But it does throw you off a little bit when you look and see the buildings actually kind of moving out toward the top of each of the left and right hand side. This is when you probably take the distortion, the vertical distortion sliders in Lightroom, and work with it a little bit to see if you end up improving the image by straightening up these vertical lines. My immediate impression on this is that you may not really be improving it if you do that. It's very hard to tell. He obviously took painstaking care to make sure that center line was perfectly vertical, the best I can tell. So I don't know if anybody else has any opinions on whether that ought to be straightened up or not. Guess not.
Well, I would straighten it a bit.
I would try.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Steve. I would straighten it, and also on the left side, probably crop off a good portion, maybe like 30% in, and really focus on the colors of the blue on the right building, and then the mauve, I guess, of the other buildings. But
yeah, these buildings really, I mean, this borders on something. It kind of reminds me of an Escher drawing in one respect, and an abstract and another. And so, yeah, I think it's worthy of, I would agree with you. Play a little bit like that with it and see if it can get focused down on it. It's, I have a bad habit of getting an image I've taken and I really like the whole view like that and I fall in love with it and I can't see the crops that ought to be done. And if you did get adventurous and you can kind of get it to the next level. Steve might be right on with that crop. Okay.
Alrighty.
While you're doing that, we have somebody in my club right now who almost every image he brings in to competition is a architectural abstract. He will go downtown Baltimore and other places and photograph these tall buildings with the windows going in every which direction and so on. And it's always, and then do something with the saturation. It does make for some interesting abstracts. Wow.
This next image is from Dr. Jim Horn. He is not online at the moment.
Okay. Wow, this is a really...
I do know in speaking to Jim, this was taken at Font Hill up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
The whole building, whole structure was made out of cement and tiles.
And the name of it, Steve, is what? Font Hill?
Font Hill, yes.
Font Hill, okay. I have to put that on my list. This looks like it's worthy of a visit.
Yeah.
Well, what works with this is it's very busy, and the placement of the picture puts that stair, which becomes a focus of my attention when I look at it. That's right in the center, right off center, a little bit off center, but feels quite good. So you've got a rather wide shot here to be able to pick up both the floor and the ceiling. And ceilings, everything's got a lot of interest to it and an awful lot of texture. Sometimes that all of these details and so on can work for you and make it interesting. Sometimes it can really distract you. The more I look at this, I would almost, yeah, you have two different pictures. One involves the stairwell here, the stairway on the right-hand side. And if I were to crop it with the stairway at the left-hand side of the picture and crop out a lot of the floor doesn't really add a whole lot to the picture. So come in close to the bottom to near the bottom of the stairs and run it straight across. I think that could work as an image to itself. The black and white processing here has done a nice job of bringing up the midtones and the dark. There aren't any blown out areas. That's been very good. But the other thing that interests me is I see between the pillars, the middle pillar and the two on the left, there is a doorway back there. And I could almost see a number of different ways you could crop that to pick up the pillar on the right of an image and the pillars on the left, and do a vertical, kind of focusing on that doorway back there. I think that might work for me better. This does let you see the whole room. I went through a couple mansions in Minneapolis this summer, and it was difficult to pick up the whole room and end up with an art piece because you wanted to pick up everything in the image, and it was just so overwhelming that as a viewer, I just needed to narrow my attention down to one or two major central objects, 1 to 3 actually. So that'd be my thinking on it right offhand. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I would really do massive playing around with the cropping on here. My, I don't want to say criticism or whatever, but my issue here is that the doorway on the left and the stairway on the right are kind of fighting with each other.
Yeah.
So I would try a crop that just totally took out the doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd try another crop that made the doorway the focus. I think there's two images here. There's two pictures here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I are in agreement there. Okay, great.
I think one other alternative might be is if you could change his perspective just a little bit, like take a step to the left and then shoot a little bit more in towards the double doors.
Mm-hmm.
Would also help, because I like the bookcase there and the light hanging down. You've got another one right up next to the column, and again, it's kind of dead space on the left side, where if you shot more into the double door, I think it might be an interesting shot. But I like the picture overall.
Yeah, the interesting thing, when I look at this, I would see more shadows would expect more shadows on the floor than I see. And I see a little bit of darkening area around the pillar toward the center, and then a dark area back toward our way back toward the doorway and one toward the front. And I'm just kind of surprised that the shadows are not more pronounced than they are in the processing. But this would be a great opportunity to work that whole room and try for a number of different angles. Yeah, and I was looking at the doorway on the left hand side. If I took a step or so to the right, and I were able to have both pillars on the left hand side visible, does that give me a different or better view or not? I don't know, because you're going to then introduce a really bright spot from that window that's behind that one pillar, and that may have been why he chose this particular view. So this is a great image in the respect that it gives you a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities for both for shooting it and cropping it to try to get there. But I love the processing. I like some things that are gritty and where you can actually feel the texture when you look at the picture. It's really good.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
Everyone see the image?
The
Yes, no?
the Jets. Yep.
Perfect. This is Jim's second image.
Okay, great. He must have been down at the Naval Academy when I was this summer. That's the way it looks. And a really good telephoto lens, because you can get in there and see the pilots and all four of those jets. Yeah, it's great. And the texture and the exhaust there shows really well. Now, this is quite nice. I assume he was panning in order to get that. I showed my set of pictures of the jets at the Naval Academy. Again, I think it was around the 4th of July that they usually do would do their flyover, other than this year perhaps. And I showed that to a friend of mine, Scott Dine, that Steve knows. And Scott said, you got the same pictures that everybody else did down there. They're all great pictures. He said, everything is sharp as a tack and so on. And he was saying this to me, but he said, you had, did you have anybody standing around you? I said, well, we had huge crowds. There were families and so on and so forth. He said, you know, that this is a bit of a mature image and it's beautiful and I've put it on my wall, but it would be much more interesting to be able to pick up people watching it or some kind of a foreground piece like that, in which case the jets become, the planes become you don't get quite as close to them to do that. So I'm just passing that on. But all that said, technically, this is a very good, sharp image. I see some noise in the sky there. Might have gone in and tried to take a bit of that noise out. But otherwise, yeah, it's quite nice.
All right. This next image is from Alex Kruger. Alex, if you want to talk about it.
This was late January, early February this year up at Strasbourg. Going up there, and it was just not a very good day. It started raining pretty good. This is about as light as the rain as it was. Trying to keep the equipment dry was a little bit of a challenge. But it was, I've got a couple other black and whites that are very nice on there. I couldn't decide on which one, but again, I'll just let you critique it and tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly on this.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, did you have a wet filter on your lens? Was that the sprinkles on your filter, or did this?
No, that's the rain coming down.
Coming down. Okay, that's sort of what I thought was going on. And what is your impression of the guy in the front there walking toward the engine? Does that add to the image, or in your view, or not?
I'm indifferent about it. There's another one where he's actually oiling the wheels. He's a little closer. That might have been, you know, it's a little different, but it just wasn't quite as sharp.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Probably the action picture would have been, had it been technically good, might have been a bit stronger than this. This reminds me, in some respects, I have a couple of Bodine books here, and if you have a chance to kind of take a look at that, he has one whole book on trains, and it has kind of that kind of a feel, old time feel, because of the black and white. My offhand impression is that it would be stronger if I could be looking at this, looking at the engine from the front rather than the back. Now that's just my immediate reaction to it. If you had some action in the cab or somebody there, then that would change the whole thing, I believe, and that would become the subject. So, but having the guy up front doesn't quite go for it. Now, all that stuff said, black and white is absolutely the right choice for this, and I really liked your processing on this because the blacks are nice, dark and rich, and you see the reflections of this nicely. Nothing's blown out at all, and that's the one advantage of shooting on what sometimes some people call soft box skies, when you don't really have a bright sun to contend with. So that would be my thinking offhand. I would probably might even think about see what that would look like if you're comfortable enough with Photoshop to erase that guy out, to see if that really takes it to where you want it to be. I don't know.
Yeah, I often thought about doing that too, just to take him out, But again, I don't think it's something I would really put on the wall just as is.
Sure.
I would wait for the next better picture of it.
Right. Right. Yeah. If you get that oiling the wheels and so on, if you get them doing something active like that, some of Bodine's pictures, the engineer was out maintaining, doing some work with it, and it just really made it sing. So that's, you know, I have not been to this location. I need to try this out sometime. This looks like a pretty interesting place to visit. I've done the railroad right up over the line off of 87 in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's a nice railroad up there, and they have I don't know, about every hour and a half, I suppose, you can take a ride on it or see it. So they have a nice show there, and it's a nice area, but there's typically a lot of people around there, which it's tough to get a picture in there. And believe it or not, there were a lot of people that day, and I was kind of fighting, with the other people to not have them in the picture.
For what it's worth, Western Maryland Railway, I think they still do this. They run a photographer's workshop.
Yes.
I've not done it, but Mike Thomas in our club has done that quite a. He's come back with some magnificent pictures.
Yeah, I want to chime in on that. I mean, I just moved to Maryland from Arizona, actually, and there is a wonderful steam locomotive railway that goes from Durango, Colorado to Silverton, and it follows the Animas River. Silverton's 10,000 feet. We're talking about serious mountains, and they run these photographer-only workshop event trains. And what they do is they stop at various places. They let everybody off. They line us up across a tape, that they've laid out. They back the train up, and then they steam by so we can take pictures.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. And I did it. If anybody in this group would be interested in trying to do that, because they don't advertise it on their webpage. What you do is you call them and you get on an email list. And then when they fire out the email that, okay, we've scheduled it, then you get on the phone real quick and you get your tickets. It's literally how that's done. So, yeah, I've got some really incredible shots from that. Steam locomotives. Such a wonderful subject for photography.
There's I can't remember the name of the railroad, but Toltec is one of the two names, and it's got two names. Northern New Mexico, and it's.
I've heard of that one. Yeah.
And I've been there a couple of times, and they've got old, really beat up engines sitting there to photograph. I've
right.
spent half a day there a couple of times.
Yeah. Honestly, as far as I can tell, the Durango Silverton line is the creme de la creme.
It is, absolutely.
And I was fortunate because I got on the email list when it came out. I was on my computer, and instantly I grabbed my phone. I called them up. They have 4 premium tickets, the caboose tickets, so you can get up into the little cupola in the caboose and shoot over the top of the train. And of course, I bought all 4 of them. But it was just really, really incredible experience. Again, if we get a few people, I know it's really hard to schedule something going across, the other side of the country and everything. But I'd be happy to help. I would love to go back and do that again. And there are dilapidated areas where you can shoot, the boxcars that are falling apart and things like that. It's incredible.
Cool.
Okay.
Alrighty. This is Alex's second picture.
Okay, Alex, you want to tell me about this?
This is kind of in my backyard in Hartford Glen. These are my daughters, and taking a picture of them most of the time is like a lottery because it's like hit the moving target and win a prize. They are always moving. Both of them are very active in sports, but again, when they were getting the cargo net moving around and getting the right expressions on their face, and they're both kind of looking in the right direction. It's a little bit of a challenge on there. This is also, I used a strobe with a soft box. I carried that out there just to try and get used to it. So get a little bit more accent on their face and some shadowing. So I've got some, a couple of things I don't care for in that picture. I will do different next time, but I like the colors and the action. But go ahead and let me know what you think.
Okay. I when I first looked at it, I wondered whether you had used some artificial lighting to augment. So that really allowed you to get their faces illuminated, get both figures illuminated properly. So that looks, and you just had one softbox out there?
Yeah, it's probably about 12, 14 feet high.
Okay, wow. All right, well that absolutely did the job for you. So I think you got nice lighting. Some of the shorts on the girl on the left are just a little bit blown out. Is that your perception, or is it actually pure white there?
No, they're very white, but it is a little high there.
Okay, seemed like that. That's sort of when you look at the image, that draws your eye because it's the brightest part of the entire image. So if you were to reshoot it, sometimes the photographer will have them wear clothing that doesn't have something super white like that would reflect the light. That gives you a little bit more flexibility. So that'd be my first thought. Second thought is, I'm looking at the trees, and are they coming in at the top and at the tops on the left and the right? Is that?
I never noticed that, but they might be a little bit. I think most of that is, some of that is the distortion, but I think there's trees in every direction in the woods there.
Okay, well, it might be because the tree on the left is at an angle. It may be that would be good to try to play on straightening up the image a little bit and see if that helps to make it work. Now, part of what happens here is, and I don't do a lot of figure photography. I got my grandchildren who are 9 and 11, and I've got a lot of images of them and playing baseball and all this stuff. So I don't do this kind of photography very much at all, but I do know that you've got the foot, the feet at the bottom of the image in the middle are chopped off, and you had to do that in order to be able to get the image in, because the girl on the right-hand side's reached up almost to the top anyway. So probably would have been good to pull back just a little bit so you can be able to get the entire figure in. The other question is on the crop, is if you worked on straightening this up a little bit, would it be a better image if you moved in from the right-hand side closer to the girl on the right-hand side and lose that, because I'm not sure that contributes to your image. And the third thing, and this is only, I think you got a good expression on the girl on the left, the girl on the right. It's a little bit unusual mouth positions there. It might be good to try to keep. I'll put when I'm trying to shoot people doing things, I'll do a rapid fire so I can try to get the best out of it. And usually 1 out of 50 will work. But that's my immediate reaction to it. Any other thoughts on your part?
My next time would be shoot totally the other direction, 180 degrees. I'd have to flip that cargo net around because I'm shooting way uphill. I mean, just from where I'm standing,
Yep.
And my eye level is probably about where their ankles are at, so I'm still shooting up. Where if I was on the other side of them, I would be shooting straight into them or maybe even down, just because that hill is so steep. But again, it's a perspective thing on there, and then I would also not see the houses in the back, which I don't think too many people see that anyway, but that bothers me.
Yeah, they're a bit obscured, but since you know they're there.
Yeah.
The only advantage of shooting from the front is you do sometimes an angle up like this when you're shooting figures. It's an angle that you don't expect, and that can make it more interesting picture than if you're going just dead on, straight on.
Right.
And that's true of about any picture. So I wouldn't. You may want to go back out and play with it again at some point here.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. This was a couple of weeks ago. You know, we were under sequestration, so we were bouncing off the walls, and it was a nice day and one of the few nice ones we've had.
Right.
It was like, come on, ladies, let's go. And we head out in the backyard. So
cool.
We'll shoot it again, though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good.
All righty. Our next image. And we're coming down the home stretch here. This is from Janice Lloyd.
Hey, I was out a couple weeks ago at Swan Harbor, my senior from high school, getting ready to graduate. And this was just one of the many pictures I took of her that day.
Okay. Really nice expression on her face. And she seems to be pretty comfortable with posing. That seems to be a good position for her. First thing, this is a good vertical, so I would probably crop it, do it at the vertical and get rid of the far left and far right hand side of the images because they don't really contribute to it.
Okay.
So the background here, it's good. You've got a focused in on her face, and her face is very sharp and crisp. And then the not too far in the background, you go to blur back there. If you wanted to go into Photoshop and select her outline, and blur the background even a bit further, it wouldn't hurt the image to be able to do that. It just keeps, sometimes when you have it blurred at this level, your eye still goes back there a little bit because it catches my attention, and I really want to be looking at her as a subject. So the only thing, I'm not an expert on lighting, but it seems to me that side lighting is probably good here, except that it's very bright on her right side or on the left side of the picture, and down her right arm, I guess it is. So some of those light areas are bordering on being blown out. It's almost too much lighting there. And usually you want to have an image like this, probably a soft box, as we had in the last picture, would help to kind of soften the shadows a little bit and decrease the contrast between the light and the bright. That said, that's a big investment of time. I don't know if you have that kind of equipment, but the image, she's a great model, good position, and it would be, I would play with the way the light hits her a bit. I have a flash that I can take off camera. It's just a little, it's one of the Canon flashes, but it has a control master. You sit right on the camera and you put the flash off to the side. And if you don't have it mounted, you can have somebody hold it and try to get the light in from the other side. And it might help to fill in a little bit so there isn't quite the contrast there. So that's my thoughts offhand on that.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't have much equipment, so I do have a flash, so I might go play with that one day.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, there are cables you can stick on the bottom of your flashing and attach it to your camera, and get you a little separation from your camera itself to get a little bit of interesting lighting on it.
Okay.
I have to say I'm lazy and I don't like fooling around with that stuff, but it is something you do to get some really good images.
Mm-hmm.
This is Janice's second image.
Okay.
Not much to say. I think I was down in Joppa walking the park and saw the cardinal, took the picture, and the sky was very overcast that day.
Okay. Well, the overcast sky worked for you. Like I said, we sometimes refer to that as a soft box sky because you don't have any shadows here. You really have it looks to me like you've got the eye of the bird is sharp as a tack. Is that accurate?
It looks sharp to me.
It's very sharp on my screen.
Yeah, very nice. Nice capture. Yeah, I envy. I have a terrible lighting in my backyard, and I have millions of birds that come out there, and I never have gotten the pictures I really wanted. This is enviable. It's nice. You've got this is another one where crop it to get rid of the stuff that doesn't contribute to your picture. So I would take all that stuff to the right. I would get rid of all that. I would crop it. You leave enough breathing space. Here's one of the tricks about cropping it. The bird's looking to the right, so you may want to crop a bit off of the left-hand side, and then not have the bird in the exact center of the picture, but give it a bit more space on the right-hand side, so it looks like it's looking out of the picture.
Okay.
Otherwise, it looks like his beak is right up almost against the edge of the picture. So by shooting it vertically was a really good decision to give him the space on the side, but I would bring it in tighter and go vertical with it. And I think it'll be a good composition. And looking in the background, everything, yeah, not everything is really just a nice capture.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Steve, am I talking too much?
Well, let's see. It's afternoon, so you're up. No, you're talking like you should. You're
Okay, all right. I didn't want to be take up too much time here. I'm sorry.
No, good comments. Keep it up.
This next one is actually mine.
Oh, good.
This actually looks like a bush, but it is a tree that grows in my backyard. I was bored and had nothing else to shoot, so I shot flowers.
Okay. What kind of lens did you use for this, by chance?
This is a very short macro lens. I didn't use any tubes, and there's no focus stacking.
Okay. I was surprised. I recently purchased a 35 millimeter 35 millimeter macro, and I never would have imagined using that. It's very short, get right up close, and you get some very nice images. This is good. You got some good good blur and bokeh all around it. The edges of the flower all the way around are nice and clean and sharp. So you were able to get them all in the same plane of focus there. And I'm looking at the pistil and stamen. They're all really good too. So is there anything I would do there? Compositionally, I think you've got it cropped just about the way it ought to be. If you wanted to, and this is like a bonus if you wanted to. You could select out the flowers themselves, and I'll oftentimes do this. And are you familiar with walking ants and the marching ants in the Photoshop?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, the image is beautiful the way it is, and I like the color, the green and all that. If you wanted to, you could select them out and darken the background just a little bit, and they would be totally out of my. You know, I'm a little. Many people view this lack focus. They'll look at something and then they'll start darting around looking at other things. That would just help a little bit if you wanted to. But that said, the green's a very good color, and I also like the coloring on the way you've done the colors on the flower itself. It's very nice, gentle pink color on those little veins. You see the reflections. That's a very nice image.
It was tricky because these flowers are actually like the size of a dime.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure.
I got questions here. You know, one is I'd like you to say something about the rule of odds here, because we have two flowers here, and the rule of odds would say it would be better composition if you had one or three. You know, just express your opinion on that. I'm just would like to have the discussion on that. But the other part was a 35 millimeter macro lens.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, I didn't expect it to function so well. Quite good.
But most macro lenses are like 100 millimeters or 135 or
the
something.
macro I used on this is 18 to 200.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of a wide angle macro.
Well, I have a 35 millimeter,
amazing.
and I also have 100 millimeter, and because it goes down to f1.8, it's really takes in quite a bit of light. But it's an odd, weird lens, but I've gotten some nice images out of it.
But if I could ask, this is Steve. When we say macro lens, are you guys talking 1-to-1?
I am.
Macro?
Yeah.
1-to-1 macro, which is a real macro?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure, because there's difference between what manufacturers say are macro lenses and a true macro, which has to do.
True. Macro goes on a whole lot of lenses. How close were you to this, Rob?
I was probably about 1.5 feet away. My macro is good, but when I get super close, it can't focus. So I have to be at least 1.5 feet away from my subject for it to focus.
All right. In terms of this rule of having 3 subjects, that is, I've been in contests where the judges counted the subjects in the middle, and if you had 2 or you had 4, they immediately discounted it. 4 seems to be pretty balanced. 2 worked for me when I looked at it because I saw the shape of the petals went from the lower left-hand corner to the upper right-hand corner, and I was less concerned with the number of objects than I was the vertical line, the diagonal line that went from the lower left to the upper right across the that's just the way I reacted to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a beautiful picture. And I'm just pointing out it seems to violate the rule of odds.
Yeah.
And yet it's, of course, all rules are to be violated, right?
Rules are made to be broken.
That's right.
Amen, amen, brother.
Right. This is my second image, and it is, you guessed it, flowers.
Uh-oh, only 2 pictures out. Okay, and use the same lens, I take.
Same lens.
It violates the rule of odds again, Rob.
One of my favorite, I don't shoot flowers often because I don't have patience for it, but one of my favorite things to do is this particular type of image, 1 in focus, 1 out.
Yeah. Well, did you intentionally put the bottom of the flowers down toward the lower right-hand corner? Was that a compositionally, did you
Didn't do that while I was shooting it. It's something that I did in editing.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes this work as well too. So, an earlier comment about going from left to right, this is a good example of going from right to left is absolutely fine. You have a good, pretty sharp view on the image on the front, and a little bit less so in the back, and it's not distracting. What I like the fact the grasses up front are nice and sharp, and that's pretty good there. It's again, when I look at the bokeh in images, I like to see it be as smooth as possible, and that might have contributed to this a little bit. And you actually do have 3 flowers here, don't you?
Yep.
Okay, so you.
Okay, I missed the
Hey,
bud.
so we're on. I like the other image a lot better. The flower, you got a lot of detail there. This is, from this angle, the dandelion, there's a plane of it right toward the front here, and it's the proper one to have in focus, and it moves out of focus fairly quickly as you roll up over the top of it. So overall, between the two, I really like the other one better than this. And again, the background is a little bit light, and it doesn't fight with the image in the front, but it would probably be less distracting if it were a little darker.
Okay.
Is there any vignette on this?
Not that I remember.
Yeah, I would think a little bit of vignette.
There might be a slight one on it.
I was just thinking
I try to make my vignettes invisible.
Yeah, I think if vignettes get too obvious, they really get distracting.
Yeah.
So just.
Yeah, I totally agree, but just a little bit.
I agree with John. A little vignetting, I think, would really boost this picture, boost the yellows.
Alrighty. And dandelions are not weeds, everybody. You can make wine, you can make vitamins. They have 500% of your daily vitamins in them.
Good to know.
So now it's my turn to criticize John. This is one of John's pictures.
I know. You've been looking forward to this.
Only since the last 2 images.
I would like to speak a little bit about this image because this was taken at the aquarium in Baltimore. This is one of my favorite images. However, I've been outspoken, so go ahead and be ruthless. Okay. I have showed this to a lot of people and I get criticism. It's also one of my most criticized images. And one of the biggest criticisms is the sea anemones are out of focus. Well, the sea anemones are not the subject of the picture. And, you know, to me, I believe that the best pictures tell a story. And this tells a story of childhood fascination. I think I captured that. Okay, so you can criticize whether I did or not. But that's, you know, the hand is the kid's hand is the subject of the image, not the sea anemones. Okay. The other thing I'm going to say about this is that this is a totally posed picture. So I asked the kid's parents first if I could, you know, use the kid as a subject in my picture. And I literally put that kid's hand at that place on the glass.
Hey, John, was this all natural light?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is, and as you know, it's a very dark shooting. I don't know. I might have shot it with my 55 millimeter Zeiss lens. I think it's the 55 millimeter. So I had an f1.8. I don't know what the actual f-stop was on the image. But look, the bubbles are sharp. The hand is sharp. So okay, I'll shut up. And I want to hear the critique.
Just a question. Where was it? Yeah. Where was it shot?
It's at the Baltimore National Aquarium. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you were not perpendicular with the tank. You were shooting at a bit of an angle from the right. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're able to get the hand in focus and the bubbles on the right-hand side. So actually the bubbles helped me to anchor into the subject because that was clear and crisp and focused. And then I actually ended up moving right to left on this for whatever reason. Now and I actually looked past the hand and didn't zone in on that initially. And part of the reason is I think it's darker than, if you want it to be the subject, it seems to me I would really want it to be, I would select that out and brighten it up a whole lot. So it looks
The
like,
hand.
yeah, so I can absolutely see it. I think
So. This is a highly processed image, and I've already done that. I don't know if I could have pushed it much more.
Well, that was my concern about it. It's the main subject. The fingers are very clear, but the back of the hand is not. And if it were a bit brighter, then it would be absolutely clear to me that that was the focus of it. But compositionally, with his head on the left, the bubbles over here, I was looking at it because I always look at how to crop out the dead space in it. You might take out some of the bubbles on the right-hand side so you focus in on it a little bit better. But that's my reaction to it. I'm not troubled by the head being out of focus over here. I think that's fine. Colors are good. So, but it's the issue of the hand being a little bit darker than what I think you want it to be.
Okay. I'll have to go back and try that. See if I can lighten it up. Maybe put a radial filter on it, just a little bit there.
Yeah, this is Steve. The other thing I think you could try, at least look at, is crop some from the right, which I believe will put more focus on the hand too.
Yeah, no, that's and I have a number of versions of this picture, and I do believe that most of the other versions I have cropped it more from the right.
I would take a point, Steve's point. If you come over to close to the tentacles of the sea anemone on the white one, and that may help to. That might help to get where you want.
Okay. But you guys, nobody's complaining about the fact that the sea anemones are out of focus.
No, you have to have them out of focus, I think. I mean,
otherwise the hand would get lost.
I think it's a really good picture. I think it's a really good picture. And I think Ron's comments are right on. If you could brighten that up, you'd be drawn into the whole thing.
Brighten up the hand, bring in the crop on the right. Yeah, that's good advice.
And you followed the rule of odds. You had one hand or 5 digits.
Yeah, 5 digits.
I got one hand, 5 digits on the hand, and 3 sea anemones.
1, 2,
Hey Ron,
3,
hey Ron, do you think
4.
Hey Ron.
And the kid only has one head.
One thing I would do, and I've seen a lot of variations on this photo. One of the great things on a photo like this is I would like to actually see the kid's face as he looks at it, just to see that sense of wonderment.
You know, that's a really good point.
Hey Ron, do you think we should cut off one of the fingers just so it's not the rule of odds?
Well, this is
try
a
that
dark
too.
turn.
Photoshop does wonders. So
yeah. Well, thank you. I think that's good advice. I think that's
This
good.
meeting took a dark turn there for a second. Cutting off children's fingers.
I didn't think it was this kind of club. I don't know.
I don't know if we should look at John's next picture.
Oh, it's grotesque.
Self-portrait. All right, this is John's second picture.
Yeah, okay. So this is taken in the Maroon Bells area outside of Aspen, Colorado. Just, it was one of these pictures which I think other people mentioned, just like you sort of pass it by and then you realize, oh, actually it's a good picture. Okay. The one thing about this is a lot of processing, a lot of brightening on the backpacker's face. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, let me take a look at the whole picture here. I'm trying to think that first of all, he's a bit, his shirt and face are bright, his pants are a little less. So I've got to work a little bit to make it's not terrible, but I got to work a little bit to be able to see him. So he's doesn't get lost, but there's a lot of things around him that don't necessarily contribute to the image. Now, if I bring it in about a third to almost 40% of the way from the left-hand side, and have be, because you've got some really bright yellow leaves here right behind him and in the trees to the right. And I think that he would become the focus of this image, similar to what you had with the other one. And having him in the lower left-hand corner, the trail's coming out, sort of going to the right. I think that might be the right place for him. The trees off to the left in the foreground are a lot darker. And I think that they contribute less to the image than the leaves, the foliage directly behind him. And the foliage to the right. So that's my quick input. It looks like you've been shooting with a Sony. Is that correct?
No, actually, this was a D700.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was. I do have a Sony. The other picture was a Sony A7R III.
Okay, it just looks like colors. That's why.
Yeah. Well, again, all my pictures are processed.
Okay.
So I don't know what I probably did enhance some of the yellows here. Yeah.
Hey, John, this is Steve. How many megapixels is that camera? Do you recall?
12.
Okay.
It's 12 megapixels, and that's part of the thing is that so my ability to crop this image is limited.
Right.
That's
the
biggest issue right there.
That's
And like I said, with the backpacker, well, I couldn't crop down. I couldn't, there's no image information below his feet there, unfortunately. I like the fact that, he's being there. He's got that, oh man, I've just had this really great trip. And, and I know that feeling, So that's what I like about this picture is
got a good feel.
captures that. Yeah. Yeah, maybe a vertical crop would be better for this. Getting rid of some of the darker. I mean, the darker on the edges helps, but there's too much of that here.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Great.
See, just Steve again. I think the picture is if you had the megapixels.
Yeah.
The picture is zooming into him with the yellow trees in the background would be a really nice shot. You got to really zoom in though, but with 12
no, but that I mean, I'm going to disagree with you there because I think I want to capture the ambiance of the scene.
I think that
It's not just the backpacker. It's also, this is a really cool place to be.
I think that proportion-wise, if you did go vertical and move the crop in from the left, and take just a little bit off, leave sky in there, about half of the sky and just a little bit off the top of that, then you get a feeling of him being lost. I mean, when I go through some of these hiking in some of the forest, you feel like you're lost in the scale of it. And that does help to maintain the scale of the picture of him in comparison. So anyway.
Yeah.
John, try brightening him up too so he pops a little bit off it.
He is already brightened. That's my point.
Okay.
That has already been done.
Yeah,
and if I pushed it anymore, it would start looking artificial.
Yep.
I spent some time doing that. So, I mean, that's what I could do with this image. That's.
Yeah, I had an old Nikon D200, so I know exactly what you mean if I tried to push it too far.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Uh-oh, Steve.
Here's one of Steve's images.
Now that's cool. That is cool.
So last October, I went to New England, went to Acadia, but I also went down to Boston where I used to live to visit my cousin. And before I visited her, the next picture you'll see was taken at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. They had a photography exhibit there. So I went in, but I ended up shooting. I like taking pictures of people while they're looking at art. So anyway, that's what the next picture will be. And this one, if you're familiar with Boston, was taken on Boylston Street. The day I was flying home, my cousin had some business, so she dropped me off downtown, and for like 5 hours, I just did some street photography in Boston. And this was taken on Boylston Street, if you're familiar with Boston. So I was shooting through glass. He was like inside a store. And when I do street, I usually don't put a polarizer on my lens, and I wish I had one to take some of the glare off the windows. So I'm shooting through glass to get this. So it was just a little kid. Next to him, which I cropped out, was his sister in the same little store. So, and the next picture you look at, so I won't talk again. There were two people looking at some art. So I had to boost the ISO because it was inside, fast shutter, and it doesn't look real, but it's the noise reduction software I use really made it look sort of cartoonish, but it's still kind of a neat picture. So I'll turn it over to Ron.
Okay, yeah, I really like this image because of the young boy's eyes are just really penetrating, and particularly because of the position with the art on the glass in the foreground. That's really interesting. I didn't capture this at first because I was focused on him. Then I realized that you used a white vignette on this. And am I correct, Steve?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, I tried black or dark, and the white I thought was the way I wanted to go.
Yeah, no, I hate to say very seldom do I see a white vignette working with an image, but this really works with this because it picks up the art on the glass, and just being able to position the curlicues on the art in the foreground. And while you were talking, I realized in the background looks like it might be his dad with a tattooed arm sticking out across it. That just totally gets lost in the background because you're kind of mesmerized by his eyes. If you were able to go into Photoshop and mop up the glare right in the middle of his hair, that particularly large one in the front, that might be hard to do, but that might be worth putting just a half hour into filling with that to see if that helps you just get that away. It's just a tiny bit distracting, but because his eyes are so magnetic, you don't get, it doesn't take away from the image the way it could. So that's a good choice with the vignetting and position and everything. So yeah, nice image.
Yeah, I'll give that a try. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, this is Steve's second image.
When I try to clone out stuff in Photoshop, I will use the what do you call it? The edge. Instead of having a hard edge, have a soft edge on the brush, and try to put it as a about a 50% opacity, so I can keep wiping it across there till I finally get it cleaned up to make it look natural. It's really hard to do some days to some subjects. Now looking at this, I like the cropping on this. The picture in the background drives the crop, and you got it perfectly placed there. You've got enough of the sofa, the chairs at the bottom showing, so you understand what they're sitting on, and bring them up into the image instead of at the edge of it. And if you look at the top of their head and the bottom of the picture, you divided it, the rule of thirds, partway through the picture, partway through them. So that gives you a good, good position. Now it just has a nice feel to it. And you said you used noise reduction to get this this kind of feel to it. Is that right, Steve?
I'm sorry, say that again, Ron?
You used noise reduction to
Yeah, that's what gives it takes away some of the sharpness and almost makes it look cartoonish like, but I think it worked in this picture. But it's a third-party noise reduction software that I think's one of the best I've ever found. And it really cleans up, because this picture, I wanted a fast shutter speed to capture the hand. This guy was like very what's the right word? I don't know. He was constantly moving his hands around, and he was talking about this picture.
Articulate.
So I had to bump up the ISO, which made it grainy. So I really had to boost up the noise reduction software to bring it back down.
Yeah.
So what noise reduction software do you use, Steve?
You know, I can't remember it off the top of my head. It begins with an I. It's like Imogenic or something like that. I'll send it to Rob, and maybe he'll push it out to everybody. But it's very good.
I've also had some luck with the right images with the Topaz denoise AI. Some images it does do anything. Some others it looks you wipe it, you turn it on and you ratchet it up, and it really helps. But it did a nice job with this, and it allows the image in the background is soft because your main subject is in the foreground. So it kind of raises the question of how much softness can you tolerate in an image whenever it works. And I've had a couple of things I went into competition with that violated some of the rules of that and weren't exactly soft enough, weren't exactly as sharp as I wanted them to be. But I realized that sometimes when the composition is so strong that you overlook that completely and you can tolerate it. And that's the case right here, because and the painting by the nature of the type of art it is not going to be super sharp as a photograph would be. So this all works well. It's good composition, good and good color. Despite the fact you're in low light, you've got real good color control. Yeah, it's nice, very nice.
Well, as my friend John would say, this has been overly processed.
I would like to add to that about that because I love the picture rather. I think that the best photos are telling a story.
Yeah.
And this photo tells two stories. You have the story that is the painting, and gosh, what is it? The story I'm getting from this is like the two girls in the foreground. These are the rich kids, and the girls in the background are sort of the servants, something like that. And then you have the story of the guy who's critiquing the painting. So there's two stories going on in this one picture. That's really cool.
All right, we are down to our last two images. This is from Ira Silverberg.
Yeah, this one was taken in Cecil County. It was a demolition derby. It's about 9 years old. The other image I have is about 8 years old, and I probably would process them a little bit differently today than I did back then. I haven't really changed it any. But I would pull in a little bit from the right side to get rid of that post that's a little distraction, and probably change the a little too dark on the boy and maybe a little too bright on the fence on this particular one.
Having it pretty contrasty actually is not an issue, because in one respect, yeah, the whites are really bright, and they might need to be tamped down a bit. The darks, the only thing that happens when you make it this dark is you lose. You see the boy there; he gets blends in a little bit with the foreground, the dark, and so on. And you really are focused on his hand and the face. That's really an interesting expression.
Yes.
All that row of cars all the way back, the line, this leading lines business, going from the right front toward the left back at a diagonal. It just has a really nice, compelling picture. I agree with you. Getting rid of that post in the front would be really good. Now, when you did the processing on this, it looks like it has a bit of a purpley feel to it. Was that intentional?
No, it shouldn't really have that. I don't remember what I was using back then to post-process at that time.
Well, I'm not distracted by it. It's just it's interesting. Interesting what it does. I wouldn't think it would hurt. I would go back and play with this quite a bit. It's really interesting just because the figure is so interesting, and I can't tell for sure if he is super sharp. From here, it looks like it's reasonably sharp, but the lines in the back, the rows of the cars and all that, yeah, this one does tell a story, to use John's term there, but it certainly would be worth playing with a little bit. But I'm not distracted by the darks, but a little bit more so from the white areas that appear to be perhaps blown out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is Steve. If I could add, Ira, what I would recommend is make it pure black and white, pull out all the color tones, and then see what it looks like, and play with some of the filters in the black and white section of the software, and just see what that does.
Oh, good suggestion.
Yeah, and actually, to go back on that, sometimes I will take a color picture and I will overprocess, oversaturate certain color bands and undersaturate others in order to be able to have them, because when you flip over to your black and white software like Silver Effects Pro, it will grab a hold of the blues, for example, and make them really, really dark, or the reds or whatever. It does help you to me, it helps to oversaturate and overprocess a color picture going into black and white. So half of the work is done before you take it in to the software. And this may be, I think Steve may be right, just, play with this several different ways and see if you can get where you want to get. I don't have any problem with the fact that the lower left-hand triangle, including the boy's pants, are all really dark, because you might want that to be a little bit lighter on one hand. On the other hand, I want to be able to look at his face and have that stand out. And that's what I don't have any distractions from that right now as it is.
Yeah, the kid's a great subject.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Ready. Final image of the evening. This is from Ira.
Okay, this one is in New Mexico. It's kind of an accidental shot because I was sitting outside at a restaurant having lunch, and my camera was on the table, and I saw this guy and I said, I'd like to get his picture. So I just clicked the shutter without looking through the viewfinder. What I would do differently in processing it now would be that branch that's curving across him, I want to make that a little more fuzzy looking, and maybe crop it a little bit differently.
Have you selected out and first of all, the lighting, let's talk about the subject in the foreground. New Mexico and Utah are great. I've met so many interesting characters out there, and he looks like he fits absolutely right in. Albuquerque or Santa Fe or something. But no, it's terrific face. You got every whisker you can see in detail. And you've got just the right depth of field, good focus on his eyes, and you got a good catch light on the eyes, which makes it work. So all of this, as far as his foreground goes, this is really a nice nice portrait. Now the background is a bit busy. He has such a strong figure in the foreground that you don't waste a lot of time getting distracted by the background. But the longer I look at it, the more the background starts to bother me. So it looks like you can do some very clean lines if you use the marching ants and Photoshop and select him out, and then take the background. And I would take the whole background out and put something else in that's much smoother and cleaner. I don't even know if, because you got pretty good contrast between the trees here, the lights and the greens and all that. That's really pretty bold. And I've done that on a number of pictures lately that I've just completely reconfigured the background because it fights too much with the foreground. So you could be pretty selective, and I imagine you have the right background you could find from your travels in New Mexico that would work, and then use the blur filter and bring that down to the point that it's not in competition with the image. But yeah, it was a great, boy, I tell you, you were very lucky with that. It's a great catch.
Yeah, this is Steve again. I think this would make a great black and white shot. And then everything Ron said, blur the background, darken the background a little bit, give it a look-see in black and white.
Yeah, black and white might work with this. That's not a bad suggestion. I do a lot of black and white portraits and really like them. I didn't react that way when I looked at this because of the fact you've got the green scarf, the light blue shirt, and his sunburned face. Those three colors, you're going to lose that whenever you go to black and white, but it might be okay. You know, you just don't know until you go and try. And I think it's not a bad suggestion at all, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, certain pictures, I think, almost require you to look at it in color and black and white and then decide. So yeah. This is like one of them. I don't know if it'll work out, but I think it's worth at least taking a look at.
I have a bad habit. If it's a big beard, I always go black and white just because it makes it feel 19th century. And I've got at least 2 bearded pictures on my wall in my room down here. One of whom is my brother-in-law, who has the biggest beard of anybody I know. So.
All right. That was our final image, unless anyone has any other images they'd like to share. All right, then I will turn it to Ron. Any parting words?
Yeah, I really appreciated the opportunity to look at the images. I mean, when I look at your work, I immediately, selfishly, kind of go back and think about things that I've done. I've probably talked too much about photographs that I've done, but it does help you in terms of evaluating somebody else's work to go back and think about what you're doing and what you'd like to do. So it's been really fun for me in that regard. And I really like this actually better than the judging experiences I've had lately, because I've had a chance to interact with you about some of the pictures, and we didn't really have to make a pronouncement of in or out and judging and that kind of thing. And so this has been it's been a fun evening for me. And if you want to ignore everything I said and made you, if you have a chance to think a little bit more about going back and do your own picture, whatever, all the better. So thanks for the chance to do this.
Hey Ron, I've known you for 10 years and I ignore you as much as I can.
Well, we're aware of that, Steve.
Hey, Ron, I really appreciate what you've done here. This is really nice. This is really good feedback.
Now, my question for you is your background. What's your
What?
behind you? What do you have behind
My
you?
background?
Yeah.
Oh, this is from the White Pocket, which is in Vermilion Cliffs National Monument.
Okay.
Kind of straddles Utah-Arizona border. You may be familiar with the Wave or
Yes.
Coyote Buttes.
Yep.
Okay. So when you lose the lottery for a permit to go to the Wave, then you go to the White Pocket.
Okay.
So it's a very interesting place. Yes.
Well, I had a week in Arizona planned after doing 2 weeks of hiking in Utah in March, but as the coronavirus is coming closer and everything was shutting down, I lost the whole week. So this is on my agenda.
Yeah.
Corona.
Well, listen. Southern Utah, Grand Canyon, of course, northern Arizona. If you want to go to that area, talk to me.
Okay.
I know all of the I can tell you where to go and camp, where you can see 360 degrees, over 100 miles, and no sign of civilization. Seriously.
If you want to go up in the area Bluff and look at 17,000 Indian ruins on Cedar Mesa, give me a call.
There you go.
About that.
Hey, Jeff, what's behind you in your picture? What city is that? You're on mute.
That is the old Edinburgh. That was shot Edinburgh. It was shot with my first digital camera, a whopping 6 megapixels.
Nice shot.
It was amazing what the old, not the CMOS, was it a CCD? No, it was CMOS.
Yeah, CCD.
The old sensors. Go ahead.
It's CCD. It's charge coupled device. Is what that stands for. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an electrical engineer. I know this shit.
Yeah, just hold 2 wires at the same time and light us up.
Yeah.
I've done it.
But I did submit one other photo, and I had never done this before. I did a vertical pano photo in France. I don't know. I think I sent it to you. It was my first photo.
Yeah, I'm looking for it now.
Okay, Jeff Henty. It's weird. Everybody that looks at it only sees the middle because you look at it on social media, and you actually have to enlarge it to get the full verticality of it. And I don't know if you can find it, but it was just. And the cool thing was, as I was setting it up, a woman walks by, and I caught her walking through the scene.